As you mentioned, Criselda, South Africa's unemployment rate hitting the highest level since the start of the Statistics Agency's quarterly labour force survey in 2008. Data from Statistics South Africa showing that the official unemployment rate increased by 0.5 percentage points, coming in at 34.9% of the labour force in the third quarter of 2021. So unemployment under the expanded definition, which also accounts job seekers who have given up on the search, increased by 2.2 percentage points to 46.6% in the third quarter versus the previous 3 months. The number of discouraged work seekers, that's increased by 545,000. Joining us now to discuss these grim figures, Zwelinzima Vavi, the Secretary General of the South African Federation of Trade Unions. A very good evening to you, Mr. Vavi, and thank you so much for speaking to us. And just, I suppose, a reminder of where South Africa is now. Looking back at July, the civil unrest we saw, I believe that snatched 50 billion rand from the economy. Now, thinking of this, these figures that we're talking about, the high increase in petrol, is it likely to spark off another round of those so-called food riots that we saw in July?
It's a matter of when will that happen and what will trigger it. And the trigger may be anything. It may be absolutely a small matter of a child knocked down by a blue light brigade, and then suddenly the whole country can be engulfed in protests that makes even the July uprisings, if we want to call them like that, look like a Sunday school picnic. We've warned about the ticking time bomb for many years now, as SAFTU and many other people have warned that the crisis of unemployment, in particular of youth and women, unemployment constitute a powder keg that can explode any moment in our faces. We have said that these levels of unemployment and poverty constitute a crisis that is simply unsustainable. And we have expressed our disgust that despite the unfolding tragedy, our government have refused to change tack and to amend its economic policies, and they have stuck to what the rating agencies, IMF and the World Bank, and the rich within South Africa and outside its borders are urging on the country to do, which is to implement austerity program. Austerity means even with these levels of poverty, unemployment and inequality, you will cut expenditure on infrastructure, on policing, on education, on healthcare, on local government transfer. You can name them all, which compound the problem of an economy in stagnation, not growing at any levels that we can celebrate, and above all, an economy that continues to reproduce poverty, unemployment, and inequality.
Let's talk about that. What should government be doing, especially coupled with what we've seen, COVID-19, increasing unemployment, driving even deeper those poverty levels that you talk about? And if you look at the manufacturing sector, which typically employs the lower skilled levels, that in itself is not contributing towards the economy. But what in fact we're seeing is a shift towards the financial and community service, which typically then employs the higher skilled labours. We talk about reindustrialization all the time, but why are we failing to see the fruits of that?
There is no industrialization program in South Africa. In fact, if you look at the results, they tell you a story of what is unfolding. In 1994, the dawn of democracy, manufacturing sector was contributing 22% to the GDP of the country. It's now down to 12%, 11%, somewhere there, which means that we have seen massive deindustrialization of the economy thanks to neoliberalism. When we warned that South Africa needed to put every effort to build and to increase its manufacturing capacity, we were told by the ministers then that South Africa must open itself to the chilly winds of international competition. They removed the tariffs even faster than they were required by GATT and the World Trade Organization, and then they forced South Africa to compete with cheap goods, mainly from the sweatshops of the Asian economies. They destroyed the big chunks of the manufacturing sector, in particular clothing, textile, footwear industries in the country. There was no replacement of those jobs. And frankly, we now on our own. The government have refused every demand we've put on the table. They have refused to put, for example, R1 trillion stimulus package to stop the bleeding in the economy in the same manner that the US government have done. We are following the Eastern or the Western Europe example of austerity at a time when our unemployment is breaking all the world records. Youth unemployment, we're sitting with the unfamiliar position of being number one in the whole world. Inequalities, we are number one in all of that. We've asked government to do something about the fact that the entire mining industry mainly is owned by multinational companies from elsewhere. And the government have refused to address the question of propertyless crisis of the black majority. We've asked them to address the land hunger on the part of the majority. Government have refused. Instead, even though they are allowed by the Constitution to ensure that they can expropriate land, even without compensation within the prescriptions of the current Section 25 of the Constitution.
So what inventive work
has not done that. As a result, black people remain the face of propertyless, of poverty, of unemployment, and you can see the statistics in this time.
So
they're looking absolutely frightening.
What can people do? I mean, just looking at the Stats SA figures, it says the provinces that have lost the most jobs, there are three of them. It's KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, but the Northwest. And the Northwest, we know that there's been a great deal of capital flight because of lack of delivery of basic services. The government always says it's not its job to create jobs, but it must create the environment. With the situation in the Northwest, it means there's a failure. What can people do to empower themselves, especially if we look at tourism? We're going into a period where there's going to be a restriction of movement, so that there's potentially a more loss of jobs there as well.
We need an active government that can promote active industrialization of the economy again. Look at the example of the Northwest and the Eastern Cape. Those two provinces have land that is regarded as the second most fertile land in the entire world. Have we turned that land into the gold of the Northwest to produce food and to provide food security for the entire province, for the other provinces of the country? No, we have not. We are sitting in the Northwest on top of the mines. The platinum belt is in the main in the Northwest, the gold and every other industry. How do we benefit from that, and who are the beneficiaries? Because as we speak, our economy remains externally orientated. We mine everything. We send the raw minerals overseas to create jobs elsewhere, mainly in China these days. We are not building industries through the pace that we have, the gold, the platinum, the chrome, and that we have in the Northwest. In the Eastern Cape, we should be a center of agriculture and tourism. Are we driving that as we speak? No. As a result of all of this, so unfortunately, and this is very frightening, out of the 9 provinces of South Africa, 8 of them have unemployment rates of above 40%, and the only province below that is the Western Cape. But look at the trend. It was 21% unemployment rate in 2020. It is now at 30%, meaning that the arrows are worsening even in the case of the Western Cape. And this is absolutely unsustainable. We we reiterate.
And the sad thing is, as you say, Mr. Vavi, unemployment for the youth creeping up towards 60%, and this amidst rising levels of crime. Zwelinzima Vavi is the General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, SAFTU.